October 13, 1453. Clarendon Palace, Wiltshire, a hunting lodge in the middle of nowhere. Queen Margaret of Anjou is 33 weeks pregnant. She has been married to Henry VI for 8 years. 8 years without a child. 8 years of whispers. 8 years of courtiers wondering if the king is even capable of fathering an heir. She goes into labor, the baby is born, a boy, a prince, an heir to the throne of England. Margaret sends a messenger straight to the king. "Congratulations," the messenger says, "you have a son, a healthy boy, Edward, Prince of Wales." Henry VI looks up, he blinks, and then he turns away. No response, no recognition, no joy, just silence. Because Henry VI has been in a catatonic stupor for 2 months now, he doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He doesn't eat unless someone feeds him. He doesn't recognize his wife, his courtiers, or his own name. He sits slumped in his chair, eyes downcast, like a puppet whose strings have been cut. He is 31 years old. He has been King of England for 31 years. He inherited 2 kingdoms, and he is about to lose both. And right now, in the most important moment of his reign, the birth of his only son and heir, he cannot even bring himself to care. This is the story of Henry VI, the king who lost his wits, his kingdoms, and his only son. Prepare yourselves. We are going to the Tower, and we are not coming back. Before Henry became the Hollow King, he was just a baby with a crown that was way too big for his head. Literally. Henry VI was born on December 6, 1421, at Windsor Castle. His father was Henry V, the warrior king, the hero of Agincourt, the man who had conquered half of France and married Catherine of Valois, daughter of the French king. Henry V was, in the words of historians, the greatest English king since Edward III. He was supposed to rule for decades. He was supposed to build an empire. Then, in August 1422, Henry V died of dysentery at the age of 35. 2 months later, his father-in-law, Charles VI of France, also died. Henry VI was 9 months old. 9 months, and he was now King of England and King of France, the only English monarch ever to be crowned King of both countries, the youngest king in English history, a baby who couldn't walk, couldn't talk, and couldn't possibly understand the weight of the crown on his head. For the next 15 years, England was ruled by a regency council. Henry's uncles, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, and Cardinal Beaufort, fought each other for control. The Duke of Bedford, another uncle, tried to hold onto the French territories. The kingdom was stable, mostly. The crown was solvent, mostly. But Henry was not like his father. He was not a warrior. He was not a politician. He was, in the words of one historian, the very antithesis of the martial traditions of the House of Lancaster. He was pious, deeply, intensely, almost obsessively pious. He prayed for hours. He wore a hair shirt beneath his royal robes. He founded Eton College in 1440 and King's College, Cambridge, in 1441, investing his time and energy in education rather than warfare. He was generous, gentle, and kind. He was also, as it turned out, completely uninterested in the actual business of running a kingdom. His contemporaries described him as improvident, malleable, vacillating, uninterested in the arts of government. He let his advisors run the country. He let his courtiers manipulate him. He let his wife, Margaret of Anjou, gradually take over more and more of the decision-making. And while Henry prayed and built colleges, his kingdom fell apart. The 100 Years' War had been going on for over a century. England and France had been fighting for control of French territory since 1337. Henry V had won spectacular victories, but Henry VI was losing everything his father had won. In 1444, Henry made a terrible decision. He married Margaret of Anjou, a French noblewoman from a family that was deeply connected to the French court. The marriage came with a secret clause. Henry agreed to cede the provinces of Maine and Anjou back to France. He didn't tell his advisors. He didn't tell his nobles. He just signed it away. When the news leaked, the English nobility was furious. They had fought for generations to hold onto those lands. Henry had given them away for a bride. And it got worse. In 1449, the French attacked Normandy. The English defences crumbled. By 1450, Normandy was lost. The English had held Normandy for over 30 years. Now it was gone. In 1451, the French took Gascony, the last major English possession in southwestern France. Then, in 1453, the French laid siege to Bordeaux. The English sent their greatest commander, John Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury, known as the English Achilles. Talbot was a legend, a warrior who had never lost a battle. On July 17, 1453, Talbot faced the French at Castellan. The French had cannons, newfangled, terrifying, devastating cannons. Talbot charged. The cannons fired. Talbot and his son were killed. The English army was destroyed. Bordeaux fell. Gascony fell. After 300 years of English rule, since Henry II had married Elena of Aquitaine in 1154, the last English possessions in France were gone. Only Calais remained. The news reached Henry VI in August 1453. He was staying at his hunting lodge in Clarendon, near Salisbury. He had already been under enormous stress. His kingdom was collapsing. His nobles were fighting each other. His advisors were corrupt. His treasury was empty. And then the news arrived. The English Achilles was dead. 300 years of English rule in France were over. Everything his father had won, everything his ancestors had fought for, was gone. Henry VI, who had never been particularly stable, snapped. The exact date is debated by historians. Sometime in early August 1453, Henry VI suffered a complete mental breakdown. He didn't scream, he didn't rage, he didn't attack anyone, unlike his grandfather Charles VI of France, who had butchered his own knights in a fit of madness. No, Henry did something far stranger. He simply stopped. He sat slumped in his chair, his eyes downcast, unable or unwilling to speak or move. He didn't recognize anyone. He didn't respond to anyone. He didn't eat unless someone physically fed him. He didn't move unless someone physically moved him. For 17 months. 17 months. A king, the most powerful man in England, reduced to a breathing statue, sitting in a chair, staring at nothing, saying nothing, understanding nothing. Historians have debated the cause ever since. Some say catatonic schizophrenia. Others suggest a depressive stupor so profound that he simply withdrew from a reality that had become too intolerable to endure. Some point to the hereditary madness that ran through his mother's family. His grandfather Charles VI of France had been famously insane. His great-grandmother had been described as mentally fragile. His mother, Catherine of Valois, appears to have suffered from mental instability as well. Whatever the cause, the result was catastrophic. England was now effectively without a king, the government ground to a halt, the treasury was empty, the law courts stopped functioning, and the factions that had been fighting for control of Henry's government now had no one to restrain them. Richard, Duke of York, was the most powerful noble in England. He had a legitimate claim to the throne through his mother. He was descended from Edward III's second son. He had been pushed aside by Henry's court favourites. He had been sent to govern Ireland, effectively exiled from court. But now, with the king catatonic, York saw his opportunity. He returned to England. He demanded to be made protector of the realm. In March 1454, the Lords agreed. But York wasn't the only one with ambitions. Margaret of Anjou, Henry's queen, had been ruling in her husband's name for years. She was fierce, intelligent, and utterly determined to protect her son's inheritance. She saw York as a threat, and she was right. She gathered her own supporters. The Lancaster faction, Henry's family, rallied behind her. And then, in October 1453, Margaret gave birth to Henry's only son, Edward. The boy was healthy, the boy was beautiful, the boy was the heir to the throne of England. But Henry didn't react. He couldn't react. He was still sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. According to contemporary accounts, when Margaret brought the baby to Henry in March 1454, the king glanced at his son, just a glance, and then he looked away again. No smile, no recognition, no words, just a glance, and then nothing. Margaret later told Henry that the baby was his. His response, according to one chronicler, Henry said that the father must have been the Holy Ghost. He literally suggested that his wife had conceived through divine intervention, because he couldn't remember or couldn't accept that he had fathered a child. The rumors started immediately. Who was the real father? The Duke of Somerset, perhaps, a handsome, ambitious nobleman who had been one of Henry's closest advisors, or maybe someone else. Margaret's enemies spread the gossip widely, but the truth is, we'll never know for sure. What we do know is that Henry was completely incapable of governing. For 17 months, England drifted toward civil war. Finally, at Christmas 1454, Henry woke up. He emerged from his vegetative state as if nothing had happened. He had no memory of the previous year and a half. He didn't know where he had been. He didn't know what had been said to him. He asked his wife what his son's name was. She told him, Edward. He nodded. And then he promptly dismissed Richard, Duke of York, from the protectorate, restoring his favourite, the Duke of Somerset, to power. It was a catastrophic decision. York was furious, Margaret was triumphant, and within months the two factions were at war. The Wars of the Roses had begun. The next 15 years were a nightmare. In May 1455, the first battle of the Wars of the Roses was fought at St. Albans. The Yorkists won, Somerset was killed, Henry was captured, but he remained king. Over the next 5 years, the fighting continued. Battles, sieges, betrayals. The nobles of England slaughtered each other while Henry drifted in and out of sanity. He would have lucid periods, sometimes months, followed by relapses into catatonia. He was, in the words of one historian, a passive onlooker in his own civil war. In 1460, Richard of York finally made his move. He claimed the throne outright. The Lancastrians refused to accept it. York marched north to confront them. He was killed at the Battle of Wakefield. His head was displayed on a pike, wearing a paper crown. But York's son, Edward, was even more dangerous. Edward was 19 years old. He was tall, handsome, charismatic, and an absolutely brilliant military commander. He took up his father's cause. In March 1461, he defeated the Lancastrians at the Battle of Towton. It was the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. 28,000 men died out of 120,000 who fought. Henry VI fled to Scotland with his wife and son. Edward IV was crowned King of England. Henry had lost his throne, but he hadn't lost his life. Edward IV, for reasons that historians still debate, decided to spare him. Perhaps he thought Henry was too pathetic to be a threat. Perhaps he didn't want to create a martyr. Perhaps he just didn't see the point. In 1465, Henry was captured and brought to the Tower of London as a traitor and criminal. He was imprisoned there for the next 5 years. He was treated well by medieval standards. He was allowed visitors. He was fed. He was kept warm. But he was also watched, constantly, because even a broken king is still a king. Then, in 1470, everything changed again. A powerful nobleman named Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker, had fallen out with Edward IV. He switched sides. He allied himself with Margaret of Anjou. He raised an army. He invaded England. Edward IV fled to the Low Countries. Henry VI was released from the Tower and restored to the throne. It was October 1470. Henry had been King of England for a total of about 40 years. He had been deposed once. He had been imprisoned for 5 years. His wife and son were in exile. His kingdom was in ruins. And he was paraded through the streets of London like a puppet, a broken, hollow shell of a man. Chroniclers describe him as a pitiful sight, gaunt, shabbily dressed, barely able to walk, his hair and beard unkempt. He had been through too much. His mind had been shattered too many times. He was no longer a king. He was just a symbol, a tool, a figurehead for a rebellion that had nothing to do with him. The restoration lasted 6 months. In April 1471, Edward IV returned from exile. He defeated Warwick at the Battle of Barnet. Warwick was killed. Then Edward marched south and met Margaret of Anjou's army at Tewkesbury. The Lancastrians were destroyed. Henry's only son, Edward of Westminster, was killed in the battle. He was 17 years old, Henry's only child, the heir to the throne, dead. When the news reached Henry in the Tower of London, he reportedly collapsed in grief, and then he accepted his fate. On the night of May 21, 1471, Henry VI was stabbed to death while praying in the Wakefield Tower. He was 49 years old. According to some accounts, his corpse bled on the pavement when it was laid out in St. Paul's Cathedral. According to others, he died of pure grief. But the truth is simpler and more brutal. He was murdered on the orders of Edward IV. Henry had to die. As long as he lived, he was a symbol, a rallying point, a threat. His body was buried at Chertsey Abbey and later moved to St. George's Chapel at Windsor. He was the only English king ever to be crowned in both England and France. He inherited 2 kingdoms and lost both. He lost his wits, he lost his throne, he lost his son. And in the end, he lost his life. So what do we take away from Henry VI? First, the cost of weakness. Henry was not a bad man, he was kind, he was generous, he was pious, he founded schools, he patronized scholars, he genuinely wanted to do good. But he was weak, he was indecisive, he was easily manipulated. He let his advisors run the kingdom while he prayed. He let his wife take control while he built colleges. He let England fall apart while he sat in a chair and stared at nothing. Weakness isn't a character flaw, it's a political liability. And when you're king, the cost of your weakness is paid by everyone. Second, the danger of hereditary madness. Henry inherited his mental illness from his French grandfather, Charles VI, the Glass King. The Valois family was notoriously unstable. Charles VI had believed he was made of glass. He had worn iron rods in his clothing to keep from breaking. Henry's symptoms were different. He wasn't violent. He was catatonic. He withdrew from the world. He stopped speaking, stopped moving, stopped functioning. But the result was the same: a king who couldn't rule, a kingdom that fell apart, a dynasty that destroyed itself. Third, the tragedy of a man who lost everything. Henry VI inherited an empire. He lost it all: the French territories, the English throne, his only son, his sanity, his life. In the end, he was just a shell, a hollow, broken man who had been through too much. He didn't want to be king. He never wanted to be king. He wanted to be a monk. He wanted to pray. He wanted to build schools and colleges and live a quiet, pious life. But he was born into the wrong family. He inherited the wrong crown. He married the wrong woman. He lived in the wrong century. And in the end, he died alone in a tower, stabbed while praying. So here's your takeaway, friends. Henry VI wasn't a monster like Caligula. He wasn't a tyrant like Vlad the Impaler. He wasn't a megalomaniac like Louis XIV. He was just a man. A weak, broken, deeply unhappy man who was born into a role he could never fulfill. He inherited 2 kingdoms and lost both. He inherited a crown and couldn't hold it. He inherited a legacy and destroyed it. He ruled for 42 years. He was King of England longer than almost any other monarch. But for most of that time, he wasn't really king at all. He was a puppet, a symbol, a hollow shell. And in the end, he lost everything: his kingdoms, his son, his life, his legacy. The Wars of the Roses would continue for another 14 years after his death. Thousands more would die. The House of Lancaster would be wiped out, and a new dynasty, the Tudors, would rise from the ashes. But Henry VI is just a footnote, a sad, tragic footnote in the history of England. A king who lost everything, including himself. Henry VI reigned from 1422 to 1461, and again from 1470 to 1471. He was the only English king ever to be crowned King of France. He lost both crowns. He died in the Tower of London on May 21, 1471, at the age of 49. His only son, Edward of Westminster, was killed at the Battle of Tewkesbury just days earlier. The House of Lancaster was extinguished. And somewhere in the Wakefield Tower, a hollow king is still praying, still waiting, still losing.